Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm just waiting for people to come in from the waiting room. We'll just wait a few seconds to make sure that everybody who wants to come in to the session can join us before we get started. Just waiting for a few more people to come in and then we'll get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patricia Alexander, the Managing Director of Shared Interest. Welcome to our fifth and final members event, where we are going to go to our South American office, hear from our team in South America and also from one of our customers there, Inca Moss. The office in Peru was opened in 2009. It was the third of our regional offices, so it's been with us for quite some time. And if you just go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. So please, as we're going through, if you want to post any questions or any comments, please post them there. And then we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the session. So I'm going to hand over to Johnny, who is the lending manager in South America for Shared Interest. So Johnny, over to you.
Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everyone. As Patricia mentioned, my name is Johnny Cabellos. I am the South America lending manager for the society. Firstly, I want to introduce my colleague, Brice Cáceres. She is the customer representative for the region. Today, we are going to present some slides that try to explain what we have doing in the region in terms of lending. Then what our customers are doing in terms to mitigate the climate change effects in the region. I will show some examples of how some shared interest coffee and cocoa customers are working in the region to mitigate the effects of climate change. And then Juan Jose Ladines and Marco Pignatelli, they are going, Juan Jose is the impact manager of Inca Moss and will explain about Inca Moss, that is a Spangus moss company that is working in Peru since more than 10 years ago, and how they are mitigating the climate change effects. Well, in terms of the portfolio in South America, regarding of this, as you can see in the upper left, we are responsible for almost 30% of the total committed credit of shared interest, with a portfolio of approximately 70 million GBPs, with 48 customers as of March 2022. As you will see, almost 94% of our funding is concentrated in Peru. However, according to our last strategic planning, we expect to diversify our portfolio in terms of countries and commodities. In addition, we have 4% of our lending in Chile through our honey exporter Apicov, 2% in Brazil, our organic soy exporter Guevana Brazil. Also, our main commodity is coffee with 57% of our portfolio, and in terms of type of credit facilities, about 14 million pounds is allocated in short-term products, which is 83% of the total portfolio in easy COEG and stock facilities. And close 3 million pounds are financing term loan products. In the following slide, we can see our diversification in commodities, and almost 80% of share interest portfolio is invested in coffee and cocoa organization. Later, 4% in honey, 2% in Brazil nut, textiles, brown sugar, mango, soy. 1% in quinoa. We have other products in about 6% of our portfolio. In terms of climate change, I want to mention that this is becoming an issue of great importance worldwide, but especially in our region. For example, in Peru, some measures are being taken by the environmental ministry, such as measuring the carbon footprint in the organizations and working in emission mitigation projects that end up affecting global warming. There are already some of our customers that are using the ministry tools to measure their carbon emissions and what to look into the market to obtain premiums by the products when they comply with offer a carbon neutral product. In our region, the team has been able to know how climate change is affecting their crops, because for the farmer, it is becoming difficult to predict the weather, harvest time, and therefore in the phases of cultivation. Ancestrally, the producer had a very accurate weather estimation, but in recent times, it is a challenge every year. They are worried because the increase in temperatures is affecting their yields per hectare and the product quality, because it affects the nutrients in the soil. This sudden change in weather and temperatures are causing precipitations to be delayed, or its cycles shortened, or sometimes more intense. An example of this is the El Niño phenomenon, a cyclical event that increases the temperature of Pacific Ocean. This affects two banana, coffee, and cocoa producers mainly through pests and diseases that affect the production. The producers, in order to face these pests, end up using chemical products that, contaminating the product, are losing the possibility of obtaining more benefits or organic primes from their buyers. In this slide, we can see some examples of share interest cocoa customers that mitigate the climate change, giving training to the producers on the management of organic plantations and sustainable production. This in order to face the pests through the delivery of organic fertilizers. I can mention some organizations like Cuenca del Guayaga, APROCAM, Ajima Cacao, that yearly try to improve themselves in terms of their offer of their organic products, seeking to improve livelihood of their members, conserving the biodiversity and protecting the environment. In this slide, other measure implemented by other share interest cocoa customer Divisoria They are installed solar dryers, avoiding to use electrical ones. And another mitigated tool is the implementation of agroforestry nurseries to replace cocoa plants and reforestation, which is the case from Ajima Cacao, for example, and Aprocam. Other measure is the production of their own organic compost. This measure has implemented by some shared interest customers, like in the southern part, we have Jose Olaya in Cusco. In the northern part, we have Fase Café, for example, from the Amazonas region. In this case, the Foundation of Shared Interest is working a very interesting project with them in terms of organic compost. In the central part of Peru, we have Pangoa. Pangoa is a shared interest cocoa and coffee producer in Junín. In the case of Pangoa, they have started their project in 2008 to recover and keep their soil producing their own organic compost, called bokaji. This is achieved using fertile prime and some buyers' contributions. This involves almost 661 producers that share the objective of reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in families that make compost. For example, the carbon generated by the transport, the fertilizer factories, packaging, among others. Pangoa expect to prepare compost by 217 members for this year, 2022, to have a carbon neutral cocoa product offered by 2025. I want I thank you all for your time today. Please let me introduce Marco Piñatelli, who is the general manager of Incamos, and later Juan Jose Ladinez, who is the impact manager of Incamos, who is going to be a presentation. And we will be more than happy to answer any questions you might have later in the Q&A section. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marco Piñatelli. I am the manager of Incamos. Thank you very much for allowing me to explain to you about the work we do. Excuse me, but I don't speak English very well, so the speech will be in charge of Juan Jose Ladinez, who is my impact assistant. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you, Johnny, for the introduction. Okay. So, hello, everyone. My name is Juan Joladines, and I'm the impact manager of Incamos. Today, I want to start by asking all of you a question. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word Peru? Although the potential answers are many, I'm sure that for most of you, this is one of the first images that comes to your head. Machu Picchu, the lost city of the Incas. This incredibly beautiful place is full of magic and wonder, and it's a key part of our culture. Tourists from all over the world come to visit it, and it's one of the things that makes us Peruvian most proud about our country. But there's another face to this amazing Andean scenery that's hardly talked about, a reality that's sadly not as bright or as magical. That's the harsh reality that most of the people who actually live in the Andean regions of Peru have to endure every single day. The people living in the Andean communities of Peru are amongst the poorest and most vulnerable population of my country. Most of them fall into the extreme poverty category and lack access to basic services. They have to endure extreme weather conditions in a place where the geography makes traveling to and from their communities highly difficult. For most of them, their main and sometimes only source of income comes from the traditional crops, which are usually potatoes. However, these are a very low profit crop that's highly susceptible to market changes, meaning that their already low income can be considerably lowered at the blink of an eye. Taking all of this into consideration, a question comes to mind. Is there a way in which these communities could increase their income? Enter Sphagnum moss. Although it is not a very well-known plant, Sphagnum moss is surely amazing. It grows naturally in certain places of the world, and Peru is one of those. Over here, you can find it growing at starting 3,200 meters in the Andes, exactly where the communities I just mentioned are located. This particular type of moss has three main properties. It can retain up to 20 times its weight in water, it works as a natural antibacterial, and it can absorb heavy metals. Thanks to all of this, it has a considerable number of interesting uses. The most traditional and the main one is as a substrate for growing plants that require high levels of humidity, mainly orchids. If any of you have orchids at home, mixing sphagnum moss with the soil hugely benefits their growth. Aside from that, you can also use it to make vertical gardens and green walls. You can use it for decorative purposes, like the kokedama that you see on the left, or the green side that it's on the right. In that same line of usage, it is also the key component of the beautiful hanging baskets, which are a very popular type of decoration in the UK. And if we go a bit into the more innovative uses, the moss can also be used as an all-natural alternative for water filtration. The filter on the left is one designed for pools and spas, while the one on the right has a more industrial focus. Based on all these uses, sphagnum moss has a huge demand in the international market. And considering this, I'm sure that you realize that harvesting moss would be a great alternative to generate income for the Andean communities of Peru. Sadly, most of them are completely unaware of the moss's properties and value. For them, it is nothing more than a useless weed. In the best case scenario, they simply leave it there without paying too much attention to it. But in the worst and sadly most common cases, they use gasoline to burn it all down in order to make room for the traditional crops. This practice comes not from a disregard for nature, but out of the dire necessity they have to provide for their families. If you look at this photo, that gray area that you see on the side of the mountain is land that has been burned over time. And the worst part of this practice is that the land they burn loses all of its nutrients after 2 or 3 harvestings, forcing them to move to the next plot of moss and do it all over again. And there's another issue that the community has to deal with, although this is one that affects everyone across the world. The effects of climate change in the Andean region have been particularly notorious when it comes to the duration of the rainy season. With every year that passes, the rain starts earlier and lasts for longer, which directly affects the community's annual work schedule and makes them more prone to rely on environmentally harmful practices, like the burning I just mentioned, to supplement their reduced income. In addition to that, the people working in the horticultural world still make heavy use of chemical products in order to ensure that the plants will grow healthier and stronger. And although this provides the results they want in the short term, the use of chemicals instead of natural products like the moss has long-lasting and harmful effects in our planet, further damaging our environment. Based on all that I've mentioned so far, it's clear that the harvesting of sphagnum moss has the potential to be an alternative to effectively overcome all of these 3 problems. What's missing in the equation is a model that allows for the harvesting process to be done sustainably and effectively. It's at this point where we step in. Incamos is a social enterprise created in 2010 that's dedicated to the sustainable production and export of sphagnum moss with a model that generates social, economic, and environmental impact amongst the Andean communities of Peru. We connect directly with the settlers of the communities and make them aware of the importance of the moss, not only for the natural ecosystem of the area, but also for their own economies. We train them on how to properly take care of the plant and harvest it in a way that is sustainable, provide them with the tools and materials that they need to do so, and help them to get the special state permit that's required to legally work with moss in Peru. Once that's all said and done, these communities become our sole suppliers of raw material. They harvest the moss and sell it to us, and we manufacture it and ship it to our clients in the international market. Our model has 4 pillars that allow it to properly support the Andean communities of Peru. We have the market that provides the demand, our communities who are in charge of harvesting, the state that controls and supervises that everything is done correctly, and we as a company who push the whole process forward. During 2021, we sold 120 metric tons of moss to 12 major clients in 3 different continents, which resulted in a turnover of over $760,000. The international market for Shpagnum moss can be divided into 4 main categories: horticulture, decorations, water purification, and heavy metal purification. Over the past years, our main focus has been the horticulture market, the most traditional one that has had a steady growth of 5% per year over the past 40 years. At this point of our journey, our plan is to increase our presence in the retail market, which is mainly represented by the decorative uses of the moss and has a considerably bigger size and potential for increased income. But if we take into consideration the size of the rest of the markets, it's clear that we have a huge potential for growth and development. And the best part of this possibility is that since all of our moss is sourced from the Andean communities, our growth goes hand in hand with a steady increase in the social, economic, and environmental impact we are doing in the Andean region of Peru. Since the beginning of our operations in 2010, the support we have received from our allies has been a key factor to the development and scaling of our model. And although all of them have been, and still are, truly important to us, some of them deserve a particular recognition for their outstanding support. In capital's equity investment was a key factor during the initial stages of our company. Since 2014, NES has been an important supporter for the development of our communities. Shared Interest has been a paramount ally for us since 2017, whose impact-friendly working capital has allowed us to become more financially efficient and have the funds required to keep the purchase of moss steady even during the rainy season. And in the case of the ILEA Foundation, their expertise and support has allowed us to improve the impact we are doing in the Andean region. Making our model as sustainable as possible has been a focus of Incamos since the beginning of our operations, in order to both protect the natural ecosystem of the Andean region and ensure that the communities can always count with moss harvesting as a constant source of income. As I mentioned before, during 2021, we managed to manufacture and sell 120 metric tons of moss to our customers in the international market. Based on our current plans of expansion and growth, we're aiming to duplicate this number by the end of 2024. But how does this increase look in relation to the availability of moss and its natural growth cycle? Over the years, we've made multiple exploratory trips in Junín to have a clear idea of the volume of moss that exists in the area. Together with the information that CERFO, the state organization in charge of supervising the correct use of the flora and fauna of Peru, has provided us, we can estimate that there currently exist almost 6,000 metric tons of moss growing naturally in the Junín region. As part of their role as supervisors, CERFO is the organization that approves the management plans required to legally harvest the moss in Peru. In order to ensure the sustainability of the process, CERFO only allows for 1/6 of the total volume of moss to be accessible every year. That amount becomes the base with which we work to develop the management plans. In order to naturally grow to the commercially required length, the moss needs a resting period of between 2 to 3 years. The management plans we ask for usually last for 3 years and are developed with the natural growth of the moss in mind. We split the authorized harvesting areas in 3 sectors and make sure that the communities move from one area to the other every year. In that way, once the management plan is due for a renewal, the moss that was initially harvested has already grown back to the required length and can be sustainably harvested once again without any impact to the natural ecosystem of the region. Taking all of this into consideration, our growth projections for the upcoming years won't have any adverse effect on the sustainability of our model. Over the past 12 years, we have worked with multiple communities of Peru and made an impact in the life of thousands of people. But for me, 2 of the most remarkable cases come from the people you can see in these photos. Some years ago, Soraya, who is on the left, had an accident that left her with a disability that nullified her possibilities to help her family and made her feel like a burden. Nowadays, she works as a moss cleaner, making sure that all the moss that is harvested by her family members arrive to us as clean as possible. Soraya became amazing at this job and found a new purpose that allows her to help her family thrive. She no longer feels like a burden And we have the certainty that when one of our clients requires moss of the highest quality possible, we don't have to look any further than the product that comes from her household. In the case of Gladys, her son won a scholarship for a university in the capital. However, her income at the moment wasn't enough to cover his living expenses. And this put her in risk of losing the possibility of studying in the university. Thanks to the moss, Gladys managed to make enough money to allow his son to live in Lima while he was studying at the university and secure a proper education. These are only two of the multiple stories we have encountered over the years of people being able to thrive and fulfill their dreams thanks to the additional income they have received from harvesting moss. To this day, we have worked with more than 15,000 settlers from over 35 different communities. From the people who are actively harvesting at the moment, over 60% of them are women. Our model has put a stop to the burning practice in our area of operation and changing for an active work of environmental care, effectively protecting 5,000 hectares of humid forest. Working with the moss provides the settlers with an increase of 27% to their annual income that requires no investment from their part, needs no specialized technology or machinery, and allows for the Andean families to thrive together in their homelands while protecting their ecosystem, sustainably using their natural resources, and making sure that our cultures and traditions are not lost. I thank you all for your time today, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Juan. That was excellent, very interesting. Just a reminder to all of our attendees, if you could use the Q&A box at the bottom for any questions that you might want to ask. So if I could ask my colleagues to put their cameras on, thank you. And Marco, great. So the first question is for my colleagues in South America. What plans do we have to support growers and producers in other South American countries? So I know we already do in some others, but Johnny, I'll let you answer that one.
Thank you for the question. Yes, in our strategic review that we are working now, we are considering some stages to increase our portfolio in the region. And actually, we're talking with a Brazil nut customer in Bolivia, for example. Later, we are considering to work with a cocoa customers in Ecuador, for example, in the first stage. We have another stage in Colombia and Brazil, and later down other countries in the next years. We are working with customers in other countries to perform new businesses. We hope to resume trips in the next months to visit them as soon as possible.
Thank you, Johnny. So Juanjo, maybe this is you or Marco. I'll let you decide who wants to answer this. I know that a lot of our members, when we first started to have a facility with Incamos, were concerned about the environmental impact and the impact on the community. And you talked very much there about how you are ensuring it remains a sustainable product for your moss gatherers in the region. But there was a question that said, what happens if the demand increases so much and you become so successful that actually the commercialization takes over from the sustainability effects? And what do you think that could happen, and how do you think that would affect the people in that region?
Yes, I can take that one. So yeah, definitely that's one of the concerns that we always have in mind, the idea of like keeping this the growth of the commercial growth of the company sustainable and the sustainability going in part. But the way that whenever we're bringing a new community to our supply line, all the methodology that we have explained that we work with is implemented in order to keep the mentality of sustainability as the main focus of the work that is being done. So in that sense, we will be quite mindful in terms of like increasing, but in the way of like we're increasing the communities that are working with us. as to keep the whole process sustainable. So in case the demand actually grows beyond what we are initially projecting, we would still be putting all of our effort in keeping all the communities working in a sustainable way in order to keep this the whole model working. And kind of like as a little added information to this, at this moment right now, the demand that we're getting from our customers would be somewhere between like 3 to 4 times what we are currently working with right now. So we definitely have a huge demand at the moment for the product, but we're still very focused on keeping this whole thing sustainable. So in a way, we could say that we prefer to do the things properly instead of just like rushing in order to meet all the demand, because we understand how important it is to keep this sustainable. And as I mentioned during the presentation, not only for the clients, but also for the natural ecosystem of the area and also for the communities, because everybody who is involved into this is getting a lot of benefit. So it's on our best interest to keep it sustainable so it can last for the foreseeable future.
Great, thank you, Anho. So another one for my colleagues in South America. This is obviously a fantastic project, and it's obviously making a massive impact to the lives of the people in this region. And as you've outlined, we're very heavily in coffee and cocoa within the portfolio. Is there an opportunity, therefore, to lend even more money to Shpagnum moss in your region? Johnny, I don't know if you want to take that one.
It's a difficult question, but in Peru, I know that Inca moss is the main exporter of Shpagnum moss but in other countries, I didn't find any similar producer. I know that in Chile will be possible to know some private companies, but when I visited Inca moss, it was amazing, really amazing. I had the opportunity to visit with Marco some communities in the highlands and the mountains from more than 3,000 meters above the sea. What was spectacular, the commitment of the communities with Inca moss. I am very proud to support them in this sincere interest.
Thank you, Johnny. So Juanjo, another question for Inca moss here. So how can, this is a question as consumers, looking at it as a consumer who is buying the Shpagnum moss, how can they be sure that the moss that they buy, it comes from a sustainable source? Is there any way of actually assessing whether it's come from a sustainable source, or could it have come from potentially organizations that are not so ethical as Inca moss?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Carol, for the question. And before I answer, thanks, Johnny, for the kind words. They definitely mean a lot to us. And yeah, this is a really, really important question, because there's always this idea of like how we can actually be sure that what we're buying is something that is going to be good for the environment and the communities, as they're saying that they do. And in the case of Peru, speaking only about Peru as because that's a place where we're operating at the moment, we are the only company that it's legally working with moss at the scale that we're doing at the moment. There is no other company that is doing this. You can actually find, if you look on the internal market, just like you can find some packs of Spartan moss that are being sold, but it's just like very low quantities, and they are being distributed by people who do this unethically, as Carol was mentioning. So in our case, we have supervised different methods in which we can actually ensure have this kite mark, as they were mentioning, in order to showcase and prove that everything that we're doing on a model actually works in the way we do. Sadly, there have been certain setbacks because, of course, like taking people to actually supervise every single community is quite a complicated thing to do because of the area where they are located, as Johnny has been there, so he definitely knows that it's a little bit tricky to get over there. But the way that we have managed to do this over time has been through the support that we get from our allies, just like Shared Interest, the LF Foundation, NEST, all of them who have been working with us. They have had, as Jenny mentioned, like the opportunity of traveling with us to the community so they can actually see for themselves that the model that we are working with works exactly the way that we say. So we can always back ourselves up with our allies if anybody is asking about like, oh, so can we be sure that what you're saying is actually the way that it works? So we always have that backup on one hand. And we also have been certified as a B Corp since 2017, which also has, there have like a very thorough list of requirements that are needed in order to prove that your model is actually impactful in all the three different aspects that we are making an impact. So those are the ways in which we can back ourselves up in order to showcase that our model is actually impactful, sustainable, and that works in the way that we do. We say we do.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, B Corp has become very popular here in the UK. It is seen with high regard, I have to say. It's not easy to obtain. And I know from recent research that we've been doing with our members around the strategic review that Johnny mentioned briefly, that they see that as a very worthy type. Any organisation that is a B Corp is a very worthy organisation for us to be working with. Now, I'm not sure if you can answer the next question, but it's from one of our members who's talking about how badly polluted our rivers are in the UK, which is very true. And could Shpagnum moss actually assist with purification of rivers? I don't know, Juanjo, is that something, is a sort of that you'd be able to answer for us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alison, for the question. And yes, so as I mentioned, like the use of the moss as a method to purify water is something that we have been researching. We have been researching a little bit over the past years because it's one of the things that we're most interested in particular, like because we all know that access to clean water is one of the main issues that everybody around the world is facing. So having a all natural, cheap, and easy to manufacture alternative that can be easily transported anywhere in the world would be amazing. So in terms of like the pollution on the rivers in the UK, there's definitely you need to know exactly what type of thing is actually polluting the rivers, because there are definitely different factors that are in play there. Different bacteria, or it can be heavy metals, or any other type of thing that is polluting the water. But as in a general term, we have tested our own brand of water purification filters on the water reservoirs of different communities over here, which had highly polluted water, mainly due to bacteria that cause stomach sickness. And the results that we got were highly positive. The water was able to be purified at a very high level, which definitely reduced the amount of sickness of disease that the people eventually got from consuming that water. And on the other hand, we also did some experiments on water that was coming from the high up in the mountains that was contaminated by heavy metals from the mining operations that are usually happen there. And in that same line of research, the results that we got from there was also very positive, with a high level of purification from those heavy metals that were absorbed by the water. So taking all these things into consideration, I would say that yes, it would be quite possible to actually purify water from a polluted river using Shpagnum moss. Although it definitely needs to, there has to be some research and some testing done, but based on the ones that we have done, the results that we got, I would be quite positive about the outcome of that.
That could increase demand in the UK quite significantly. So yeah. So another question, you're doing all the work here today, Wano, I'm afraid. Another question for you is, are there any long-term effects on the removal of the moss from the remote highland areas?
Yes, so to explain that a little bit better, if we were talking about removal, as like taking something completely out, there will definitely be some very like considerable effects on the natural ecosystem of the area. But the way that we teach the communities how to work with the moss, and it's by harvesting. That's the words that we use, because in a way, what we are working with are the fibers that grow above the ground and not the root of the plant, which is under the soil, under the ground. So all the product that is being worked with and what the communities are taught to work with are the fibers on top. So in that way, once they take it out, they harvest the moss and they give it to us. After 2 or 3 years, since the root is still under the ground, it's going to grow back to its natural length without any type of side effect to the natural ecosystem. So in that sense, yeah, the removal would have some particularly bad effects to the ecosystem of the area. But since what we are doing is a harvesting, then there's no side effects to it.
Great, thank you. I'm afraid there's another one coming your way as well. So gender equity is seen as a very important sustainable development goal, and our members are always keen to understand the gender balance and the role women play within the organisations we work with. So you mentioned on one of your slides that you have a 60% participation, female participation in Incamos. The question is, well, what kind of participation is that? What role do the women play within Incamos?
Yes, thanks, Joyce, for the question. So the politic with which we manage all our model when it comes to the people harvesting the moss is that anybody from legal age can work with the moss, and that the payment goes to the person that is harvesting the sack of moss. So whoever harvests the moss is going to get the payment for the amount of sacks of moss that they're harvesting. So something that usually happens in the Andean communities is that inside of each household, the man is the one who is commonly more focused on working outside, working in the fields, and the women are usually relegated to more of a household task. So they take care of the house, they cook, they take care of the kids, and they take care of the cattle. So what usually used to happen was that a lot of these women, during their day, they would go to let the cattle graze, and they would just like sit there, keeping an eye on them up until the moment that they would finish, the cattle finish grazing, and then they would just like pick them up and take it back to their houses. But now what a lot of these movements started to do was to just like make a little bit of a better use of their time. They would start harvesting moss while the cattle was grazing. So in that way, they were just like spending their spare time, to say it in a way, a little bit better, and making an additional amount of money, which was directly paid to them. So as some of you might know at this point, there's still a very prevalent male-oriented mentality amongst the Andean communities. And the man is usually seen as the head of the house, or the one who's just like in charge of how things should be done and just like making all the decisions, because he's the one that is usually bringing the money to the table. But the women started to just like making a better use of their time and starting to get paid by those sacks of moss, because we always pay to the person who's harvesting. They started to bring money to the table. So the situation started to change a little bit more. They were empowered inside of their own households, because they were now on par with their husbands or their partners, because of the money that they were bringing. So this whole thing made moss harvesting quite an interesting choice for women who wanted to make a better use of their spare time in order to make some money. And that ended up having, to say it kind of like in a way, an unforeseen but quite pleasant side effect to us, which was that the amount of women who were harvesting has always been an increased number in comparison to the men. So usually any time that we are on the harvesting season, around 60% of the people who are actively harvesting moss are women. And sometimes that number can be even a little bit higher.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who's been with us today. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our webinar today. I was going to say this afternoon, but of course it's very early morning for our colleagues from South America who've joined us. and we'll be able to let them go and get the breakfast very shortly. But big thank you to my team, of course, in South America for the presentation, and huge thanks to Juanjo and Marco for joining us here. You know, very worthy, worthwhile organisation in Compost. So I'm glad we've had the opportunity to share that with our members. So thank you for joining us and have a good day. Bye for now.